Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us on this little presentation about the Global Compact and how we would like to work with the business community to help us create the world that we all want. I'm going to take you a little bit of background about the Global Compact and then talk about the ways that we need to work to make the required progress, and then also explain to you the tools, enabling guidance, etc., that we can give to help businesses on their sustainability journey. First, a little bit about our history and how we got to where we are today. We were launched 20 years ago by Kofi Annan, the then Secretary General, who reached out to a group of CEOs at Davos, and he asked, could we, the United Nations, initiate a global compact of shared values and principles? And that is what started the initiative. 40 companies signed up at that time, and CEOs wanted to work together to create what is now the UN Global Compact. Together, they devised a set of principles, or values, if you like, which would form the basis upon which responsible businesses would operate. These principles cover human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. And they are the heart of the Global Compact. Every CEO commits to embed this into their business and run their business operationally. They are, if you like, a common ethical and practical framework for operationalizing corporate responsibility. They're derived from UN declarations and conventions, and they represent the fundamental values that business should embed in their daily strategies. So since that time that the early leadership and the CEOs, 40 CEOs, developed these set of principles, now many organizations have joined up. 10,000 CEOs have signed up on their business on behalf of their businesses to these principles. Over 3,000 non-business members have joined. We operate across 160 countries and in over 60 local networks, 68 at the moment. And that covers 80 million employees who are touched by these principles of responsible business. Now, we also have to achieve a set of goals if we are going to deliver the world that we want to live in. Because we didn't start the Industrial Revolution with every business and every government operating according to these principles of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption, we have to make some transformational changes today to get us on track to create the world that we all want. So this is why we have the Sustainable Development Goals. They are a set of goals that articulate clearly what it is that we mean by the world that we all want. They have a related, deeper purpose for business. They demonstrate the scale, the ambition, and they are the boldest vision that humanity ever adopted. They represent aspirational long-term targets for business and other stakeholders to work together towards to create this world. So, working in a valued and principled way towards a set of ambitious goals is the way that we together can deliver the world that we all want. So we ask ourselves, after 20 years or 5 years into the Sustainable Development Goals project, as it were, where are we? How is progress going? Well, let's remember that in the last 20 years since Kofi Annan launched the UN Global Compact, there has indeed been great progress in the world. When you look at child mortality, maternal mortality, those have halved in the last 20 years. We have lifted 1 billion people out of poverty, and so indeed there has been progress made. But we are still a long way from delivering the goals set out by Agenda 2030. Or the Sustainable Development Goals. There's a number of KPIs that you can look at, and there's just a handful of them here. It's going to take 202 years to close the economic gender gap if we carry on in the same trajectory that we are on at the moment. We know that there are 8 million tons of plastic entering the ocean. There is still child labour, 150 million children labour in our supply chains. That is clearly related to poverty. We know that the global warming crisis is upon us. We are working towards a over 3-degree warming trajectory, and we need to reduce that so that we reduce the warming to 1.5 degrees. And biodiversity is under threat in many ways. Million species face extinction. So there are many things that we need to do to get us back on track. In the middle of this journey, which was already tricky, we've been hit by COVID-19. So it's worth stopping a minute and to think about the impact that COVID has had on this journey towards the Sustainable Development Goals. To quote Antonio Guterres, the current Secretary General, it is an economic crisis, it is a social crisis, it is a human crisis that is fast becoming a human rights crisis. Let's look at a number of data points. There are plenty, but here's a handful to help us understand what we're facing. Remember that 60% of women's employment is in the informal sector, and that is the area most impacted by COVID-19. And remember, before that, even before COVID, women aged between 25 to 35 were 25% more likely than men to be in extreme poverty. So we can be sure that COVID is going to negatively impact our progress towards gender equality. 10.5% of working hours are expected to be wiped out globally, equivalent to 305 million full-time workers. That's on top of the already 30 to 40 million jobs that we estimate have been lost in Q1. The IMF, therefore, is forecasting a reduction of 3% of global GDP, and that will disproportionately affect developing countries and more vulnerable people. Remembering that this has disrupted supply chains all around the world, we can think about the provision of very important services and products that will be disrupted. Supply chains for water, for sanitation and hygiene products, they have been disrupted, making it more difficult for people to get relevant supplies to the people most in need. That's just one scenario. So we have to remember that we are going to have to double up our efforts even more to make sure that we exit this crisis better, more equal, and ready to continue to drive towards the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, last point I just want to make here is that this crisis has thrown into stark reality things we've already known, which is the inherent inequities in the system because COVID is affecting the poor, the vulnerable, and minorities in a much stronger way than others. So what you'll see is sustainability, and throwing this into stark reality has made people realize that we need to work on this stronger. And what you do see is that sustainable investment is performing better in the downturn. And I will come back to this a little bit later, but just to show you one analysis by Morningstar, it's shown that 25 out of 26 ESG index funds are yielding higher returns than non-ESG benchmarks in Q1 in the middle of the crisis. So it's interesting to see the strong organizations committed to an equitable world are performing better under a crisis. And we'll come back to that a little bit later. Now, this is because there is indeed awareness of the fact that we need to adjust the system and we need to act on the Sustainable Development Goals. So let's take a look at that. CEOs are very aware of the issue. 88% of CEOs interviewed by Accenture last year agreed that the whole global system needs to refocus onto equitable growth. So they see the need for systemic change. 71% of them agree that business can play a critical role to deliver the goals. Interestingly, only 21% think that they are doing enough right now. So that's interesting. What's happening? Well, there are a lot of them taking action. 84% of companies in Global Compact report to be taking action on the Sustainable Development Goals. Over 90% of them have principles, policies related to the 10 principles embedded into their business. So we see understanding, awareness, commitment, action, but we're still not on track. What is it that we're missing? Well, there's two things that we need to be thinking about. One is the plans, the goals, the targets that businesses are setting for their corporate sustainability projects are not ambitious enough. By that, I mean they're not aligned to what it will take to deliver the goals in the next 10 years. So we need to help understand what is a goal that is aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. And then secondly, that needs to be scaled. All functions, all departments, all supply chains of businesses need to be on board, and we need to make sure that thinking and that best practice is scaled to as many businesses around the world as possible. 10,000 is great, but we need many more to be taking action and making progress. Let me bring this into a little bit of clarity for you. 84% of businesses are taking action against the Sustainable Development Goals, as I mentioned before. But only 39% of those goals are aligned to environmental needs as defined by science or to societal needs required to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals. So we need clarity on what is an ambitious goal. Only 46% of companies are truly aligning their strategy behind those goals. So we can't be sure that they will be delivered through the whole of the organization with a view to really making a change towards the Sustainable Development Goals. And only 37% are really looking at redesigning business models in order to achieve these goals. So we still need more in terms of ambition and scale. If we just look at the social aspect, look at labor. 94% of organizations, businesses in the UN Global Compact have a policy on labor. In many countries, it is legislated for in any case, but only 45% of company policies do ensure an adequate standard of living. So there are some form of policy, they're not necessarily being being impact evaluated, and they don't really ensure what is defined by the Sustainable Development Goals is that everybody having a decent job. 31% have supply contractors. That means that 70% don't really know what's happening across the supply chain and therefore not ensuring decent work for all. Let's look at the environment. Again, 94% of companies have a policy on this, and again, often legislated for. In this scenario, we have high levels of impact evaluation. 62% of companies, incidentally, are tracking their impact on the environment in some way, but only 35% have supply chain and contracting agreements, and only 31% are running a true life cycle assessment. So we're not really scaling this type of commitment, and we're not really measuring a life cycle of all of our elements of our businesses to make sure that we're doing what is required to ensure that we do not heat the planet up by more than 1.5 degrees this century. So clearly what's required is to move away or build on top of the current great incremental changes that are happening, and to see real transformational change in a significant number of businesses across the world. And that is what's driving the work that we're doing, the goals that we're helping to set, the enabling tools, guidance, etc., that we are putting in place to help businesses work with us towards delivering the Sustainable Development Goals. We know it's a huge challenge. We know it's complicated. There are many opportunities, ways to report, projects to do. It's not clear how to get started necessarily. How do I report? How high is the goal? Is the goal high enough? What am I working towards? How do I measure against everyone else, etc.? And we're intending to help cut through this and make it clear what is the level that we're trying to achieve as a unified group. How high does the goal look like, and what does it take to deliver against it? We have a series of enabling tools, guidance, etc., and they fall into 3 different areas. So I'm going to take you through each of these 3 to help understand what it is we have to help and to enable companies, and how we hope that will give us the best chance to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals within the next 10 years. The first area is enabling you to communicate your targets, your commitments, and the progress against them, and thereby build trust and transparency. The second area is in tools, training, guidance to help you get on that journey to deliver against those goals. And then thirdly, we give you access globally and at a local level through our local networks, the chance to really shape the corporate sustainability agenda in businesses and to articulate what is good, what it really looks like, and also to influence governments, partners in your nation, so that more organizations are working together to achieve best practice. So I take each of these one by one. First one, communicating your commitment and your progress, and how that will build trust and transparency in the business. We know that the number one reason organizations join the Global Compact is indeed to do this. So CEOs commit to the Secretary General to embed the 10 principles into their daily practices and to take transformative actions to help deliver the goals. That commitment is articulated clearly on our participant profile. Every participant has a profile on the website. It's a live and updated profile, can be updated in partnership with the organization, but helps show the level of engagement with the Global Compact, the projects that the organization is working on, and also the Sustainable Development Goals that the business is working to. Aligned with that is a media toolkit to be able to communicate progress, projects, commitments. We have an annual recognition scheme, SDG Pioneers, where we recognize individuals who have gone above and beyond in progressing the Sustainable Development Goals in their country. These are run regionally and then built up to a global recognition system. And they are awarded every year at the UN Global Compact and at the UN General Assembly, as you can see with these flagship events. So one by one, showing you a little bit of these in detail. The participant profile, here's an example. It shows the Sustainable Development Goals. It shows the reports, the reporting history of the organization, links to the company social media feed, and we can update that with videos, etc., as needed. It's aligned to a media toolkit that helps us collectively communicate those stories and show the progress that's being made. These are recent SDG pioneers who are recognized at the UN General Assembly Week here in New York, and that's an annual recognition built up from the regions. And finally, the flagship events that we have to communicate progress, a number of those. So today we're here at the June event, the Leaders Summit, which obviously, given the scenario, the COVID-19 crisis that we're in, is virtual. We've been running virtual events in the run-up to this Leaders Summit, largely driven by COVID-19 crisis. We needed to show organizations and businesses what can be done, what needs to be done, what businesses are doing to tackle the crisis and to make sure that we create an equitable and a climate-related, climate-friendly approach to moving out of the COVID crisis. We've done these across the world and with a significant series in China and Africa. These are all now recorded and online and can be picked up again. We will have a UN General Assembly in September. The events will be virtual, but the same events will happen, the Private Sector Forum, the SDG Business Forum, etc. We know that the Oceans Conference, the UN Oceans Conference, will happen next year. Whether it's virtual or physical or a combination thereof is yet to be confirmed, and we will keep you updated on all the UN events that are happening. Finally, the heart of this whole segment of communicating and your progress in gaining transparency and trust behind the organization is the communication on progress. Every year, businesses update their sustainability report and report to the Global Compact on how they are addressing the Sustainable Development Goals and how they are integrating the principles in their everyday business. This is a project that's currently under development, and next year will be presented as an upgraded communication of progress, aligned to the goals that we know are the level of ambition required to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and data will be enabled on an open platform so that you can aggregate, evaluate, test, and use the data being presented by companies going forward. This is in development, is obviously a digital transformation and will be available in 2021. And that will allow us ongoing assessment of progress and therefore sharing best practice and understanding what progress is really being made. So that is the section all about reporting, measuring progress, and communicating to the world the great progress that's being made and the best practice that's happening. The second chunk of support that we have is tools, guidance, training to enable companies to make progress, to learn from the companies that are leading edge and to step up their agenda going forward. So we have a number of resources in this area. In the library, we have a lot of guidance. I have a number illustrated here on this slide, but there are lots of different tools and guidance available to you. The water stewardship tool just shows by biodiverse area where the water issues really are, what is required to take place in those areas, what are the actions businesses need to take, and what are the actions that leading businesses are taking. The science-based targets tool, many of you know about. It's how taking a commitment on climate action that aligns to the 1.5 degree scenario is what we're promoting. And the Science-Based Target Initiative enables companies to be evaluated their plans to make sure that they really are aligned with the science required to keep us below 2 degrees. The blueprint is a goal by goal view, so you can take each SDG and understand what corporate leadership looks like in that goal. What is required of a business to help achieve that goal, and what are current businesses at the leading edge currently doing. The fourth one that I'm illustrating here is a practical guide. It helps businesses understand how they can report on their progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. It's in partnership with GRI and aligned to their principles, so their businesses know, how do I start? How do I get reporting? How do I show progress? That's a practical guide to get going. But as I said, that's just a number of the guides that we have. Again, lots of tools to help businesses progress on the sustainability journey. First one here being the Gender Gap Analysis tool. This is an online benchmarking and analytics tool. Businesses answer a number of questions, go through the tool, and at the end it gives you a score and an understanding of where you stand in terms of gender, benchmarked against other organizations, and helps guide actions, practical steps that a business can make to move towards gender equality. Similar but broader tool that works in a similar way is the SDG Action Manager. This we have developed in partnership with B-Lab, which is the reporting system behind the B Corp status. It's a web-based impact management solution. It enables you to do self-assessment across the 10 principles and across all of the Sustainable Development Goals, and to benchmark against other organizations who are taking the survey. Available in a number of languages, and enables a business starting on their journey to really understand where they stand today with respect to the principles and the goals, and therefore stimulates thoughts and ideas as to where they should start taking action and how they could put in practical steps to make progress. Another tool that recently came out earlier this year is the Decent Work Toolkit for Sustainable Procurement. This tool helps you understand why it's so important, where the levels of issues are, and understand how decisions that we're making are impacting the workforce around the world. Then how to communicate what the requirements are and the goals are across suppliers, and finally how to make sure that we embed decent work in across all our corporate practice. So that's another toolkit that came out early this year. We have training. We have the UN Global Compact Academy, which is a series of virtual sessions and e-learning courses available to companies who participate in the Global Compact. They are how-to projects, learning sessions that stay online and are on demand, that really help you understand how to get about doing a very specific area, long-term water security, how to set a human rights approach, how to go about ensuring decent work across the supply chain, etc., etc. They are run by a combination of a UN, civil society, or an academic expert, plus a business leader who is leading edge in the area. So you get a real understanding of what are the practical barriers, how to make it happen, how do businesses overcome the traditional issues on their journey. And there are also a set of influencer series in the Academy where we bring some of these things alive to all businesses, whether they're members of the Global Compact or not. A good example of this is the recent COVID-19 Academy series that we ran every week in the run-up to this event today. These were clearly initiatives that we needed the broad community, business and non-business alike, to really understand, firstly, what's happening as a result of the COVID-19 crisis, what needs to be done as a result of the COVID-19 crisis, and what leading businesses are currently doing. So we ran a number of these in the run-up to this Leader Summit. They are all online and available for all organizations to see. So we do extend the Academy to all businesses at specific times. And finally, the other area that we have to really embed great practice and high ambition across a number of organizations at scale is the Global Impact Initiatives. We are launching 4 Global Impact Initiatives, the first one being SDG Ambition. And through this project, we will articulate clearly across all issue areas what is a goal that is aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. What should businesses be working towards in order for us to deliver these goals? So if you like, that is the articulation practically of what we mean when we say ambition. Also, once we have set those goals are clear, then the Impact Initiative is a accelerator program on the ground in a local network to help businesses achieve those goals. We have a deeper dive on climate in order to achieve a 1.5 degree warming scenario. We have a deeper dive on gender, target gender equality, so that we're all working towards gender equality. And we also have one for innovation to help young innovators in businesses develop new business models and transformational change that will drive their business and will help us to deliver the goals. These impact initiatives are done in collaboration with the global office and the local networks. By that, I mean best practice, leading companies who've been crafting best practice with the Global Compact globally for years. That is the content that goes to feed these impact initiatives, but they're all run through local networks all around the world. They take the thought leadership and best practice. A minimum of 1,000 companies will engage so that their corporate behavior is changed, and we will measure the outcomes at scale. The programs themselves are a combination of engagement opportunities, awareness raising campaigns to influence more businesses plus governments and other organizations in a nation, training, mentoring, and blended learning. They offer global and local engagement and will cover all 70% of activities delivered by the Global Compact on the ground. So that is a way that we're really translating this best practice, this high ambitions, right through the world across the local networks everywhere. So one of the ways that a participating company is able to access this information is through direct access to help. We have a UN Global Compact help desk, and everybody has access to the help desk who can give you immediate response, particularly on administrative issues, practical issues. Also, a participating member has a dedicated participant engagement manager who you can set up regular calls with, and through that, able to really understand what's coming up, what are the priorities, how to work together, and get some real opportunity to work one-on-one with an engagement manager. And then finally, but certainly not the least, is the local network support. Many companies really wanting to work together with an organization on the ground. And for many, this is where the impact will be the greatest, because we can really affect national plans. So our local networks are really obviously the first line in connection with an organization on the ground. So we've talked about setting ambitious goals. We've talked about showcasing the progress against them and bringing that transparently to the world to build trust in the organization and to inspire more organizations. We've talked about how you can get practical help and tools and support. And now the third one area that I'd like to talk about is how you have a chance by working with the UN Global Compact to shape the corporate sustainability agenda. How do you articulate and how can you work on what does best practice look like and take a leading role in leading the world towards best practice? We do this globally through our action platforms. These are working groups of businesses, academic leaders, UN partners, where these groups are working together to define leadership on a critical sustainability issue and to inspire continuous performance improvement and also best practice across many other organizations. They're time-bound plans. They work to address a particular sustainability challenge and they deliver guidance, support, best practice, advocacy, whatever's going to take to make that best practice come alive. What you see at the global level is we do drive best practice and we do communicate at a global level, and the 237 companies that have signed to the 1.5 degree warming scenario are a good example, and 150 of those CEOs recently called out to companies, to governments, globally, to exit COVID in a way that is more equitable and that is aligned to a 1.5 degree scenario that those companies have already signed up to. So we do this globally, but actually the impact nationally and by our local networks is probably much more significant. We recently saw the UK local network write to the UK government asking them to focus all their COVID response activity towards a climate-friendly scenario and also to a more equitable nation where more people are included in the future of the country. So that's very practical. It can turn into genuine policy actions at a local level. So this is a strong commitment and is strongly driven by the local networks. There are, at the moment, 175 policy dialogue initiatives, and they include at the moment 3,182 of the UN Global Compact companies in those dialogues, influencing policy and influencing change, so that more organizations who want to join this movement are able to operate in clear, simple, long-term operating scenarios in their nations that is working towards this agenda with them. We know that there are 1,180 private-public partnerships in place across our local networks around the world. And it is in this area that we can make a huge impact if we work together. We can really impact how nations, how people, how businesses are working together to create the world that we all want. So I hope that this has shown you that what we're trying to achieve is we need to make sure that the plans and the goals that we're setting are aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. Otherwise, we won't really deliver what we're trying to achieve. We want to help organizations do that, give you the tools, the practical help and support so that you're enabled to deliver against those goals. We want to showcase those goals. We want more organizations to step up to them. We want to be able to showcase best practice, and we want to scale that around the world. We also want to help you be able to shape what this agenda is all about, nationally and globally, so that it's very clear what is it that the world needs to do, and it's clear how to do it. I think it's also worthwhile we just take a little bit to say, this isn't only a good agenda for delivering for the world and society and the planet, it's also a good agenda for business. And I think it's quite obvious, really, that these organizations are the best run organizations. So this kind of goes without saying, but I think it's worth to pull out a little bit of information. This is a model which a number of you will have seen, and that is proven that when a company embeds sustainability in its strategy overall, we have enough data and enough studies to show that you get improved customer loyalty. That's not surprising because many consumers and customers alike are looking for sustainable products, sustainable solutions. You have improved employee relations. Again, that's not surprising. The brightest young people coming out of good education at the moment all want to work for a company with a higher purpose that has a clear commitment to society and the environment and a role therein. Innovation, well, of course, when you constrain people around a set of parameters, it fires off innovation. It makes you think about a new solution, and therefore we see more innovative products that meet customer needs and consumer needs coming out of these companies. It inspires positive media coverage. It obviously turns into strong operational efficiency because you have to really look in detail at all levels of the operations, and that makes you become more efficient, better working, lean manufacturing, etc. Obviously, therefore, has a strong role in risk management. Products that meet customers' needs for sustainable solutions is much better for sales and marketing teams to deliver, and clearly supplier relations are improved. Supplier relations where you really understand commitment to the people, labor throughout the supply chains, the long-term commitment to these suppliers are obviously better. And when things are difficult, that's when these relations really come to bear. And this clearly helps manage stakeholders, be they investors, be they NGOs, be they civil society partners, be they governments, etc. Are obviously much better understood when the processes, the targets are transparent and the progress towards them are better. This clearly drives, obviously all of this together, better profitability, higher corporate valuation and a lower cost of capital. And we'll see a little bit of this later. And in the end, this is short and long-term value creation for both shareholders and the society for businesses. So it's basically a business driver. CEOs absolutely understand this. There's the Accenture study that was done last year found that 99% of CEOs who manage businesses with revenue of over $1 billion believe that sustainability will be increasingly important to the future success of their business. Now, we looked at a number of parameters: brand value, revenue growth, risk mitigation, and cost reduction. And we saw that a significant portion see this important to today, but they all saw that it's going to be increasingly important. So 71% said in the next 5 to 10 years, my brand value will be determined by sustainability. Revenue growth, 57%. 52% mentioned risk mitigation becoming more and more important, importantly led by sustainability in the next 5 to 10 years, and cost reduction, 51%. So clear business levers are going to be influenced disproportionately by sustainability practices. We do see this in financial performance as well. If you look at the boxes on the left-hand side here, this is a study done by Arabesque and Oxford University. They took 200 academic studies about the performance of companies with high ESG ratings. So tried to pull together lots and lots of these analyses that have been done. And in 50% of these studies, high ESG companies were gaining a lower cost of capital. 88% of those studies showed that high ESG companies had better operational performance, and in 80% of the studies, they showed better stock price performance. So absolutely financial results in the market. In all of them, these companies showed a higher return on equity. Interestingly as well, and I mentioned this earlier on, that in the crisis, in the difficult situations, when you really look to how these companies are performing, what we're finding in the COVID crisis is that companies with the highest ESG scores are performing better. The latest Bloomberg results showed that they were performing 50% better than their peers. And if you want to ask why, it's quite clear. They have a long-term point of view. They're going to be here for a long time. They're not leveraged up. They have strong relations with their employees. In a crisis, you need your employees to be fully aligned, fully empowered, to make fast decisions and act quickly and to be agile. You only have that when your employees are fully engaged, loyally behind the mission and the goal of the companies, and know exactly what needs to be done at that time. This is what these organizations are all about. And obviously they also have very strong relationships with suppliers, good supplier relationships for the long term, and commitment to those, and retrospectively. So this is clearly what's happening. What we have here, a chart on the right-hand side, is just a measure of the Russell 1000 versus the Just Cap index, and you see that the ethical companies through the Just Cap in the US outperform, and it would be interesting to see how that trajectory moves during COVID. For all of this reason, it's clear that investors are listening. I mean, you can Google this, and there are a number of measures and KPIs out there to show what the investment community is thinking. Well, there are 3,000 companies now, investors now signed up to the Principles of Responsible Investment, our sister initiative for investors. So this is a growing trend. The biggest asset manager at BlackRock always makes a statement each year from Larry Fink to clients. And again, even more ambitious statement this year coming out, showing that the biggest focus for organizations should be related to climate change through the rising global temperatures that is affecting the world and business, but also what is required to deliver the global transition in a just way to a low carbon economy. So absolute commitment to drive and accelerate a significant relocation of capital towards organizations who are taking a just transition towards a low carbon environment, a low carbon business, and believe that that is going to be driving long-term and stable returns. I have a little picture here of the Business Roundtable in the US, who are joining a number of other organizations, saying that their commitment is not only to shareholders, but is also to society as a whole for a more equitable and more sustainable world. For this reason, we see a quarter of assets under management could fall into the category called sustainable investments. That is expected to grow 20 times over the next decade to be worth $250 billion. And actually during COVID, what we've seen is that investment funds with higher ESG ratings are getting twice the amount of investment than others. And this is an OECD stat that's just come out to show that during the crisis, people are really focusing on sustainable businesses. We see in it as well ourselves. In the Sustainable Finance Action Platform, Enel, the energy company from Italy, is the patron of that organization, and they issued the first SDG bond. It was the Action Platform companies together that created the guidance on how to issue and what might be the way forward on SDG bonds, building on the growth and attractiveness of green bonds. The first bond was launched last year, raised 1.5 billion and was 3 times oversubscribed. And this reflected broad financing needs that Enel would have to take to make a just transition towards a fully decarbonized energy company. So it had goals on additional capacity to extend energy to more people and help them lift themselves out of poverty. It has goals on meters, investment, digitization, innovation to enable more efficient energy. It had goals specifically on low carbon energy services, more capacity, electric mobility, increased charging points, etc., to really drive a transition to a low carbon economy, and also targets on CO2 emissions towards full decarbonization by 2050. So these changes and these transitions needed to be funded, and they were not hard to raise money for. You do see that these organizations who put sustainability at the heart of their agenda find higher valuation, creditworthiness, etc., because they affect margin, they affect operations. Boston Consulting Group did an analysis across a number of sectors, from packaged goods to mining, and found that higher scores can lead to as much as 12.4 margin points, which is significant, certainly in the CPG scenario, up to 19% higher market valuation premiums, and that certainly happens in the mining sector, and that overall they positively impact creditworthiness for the long term. And this has been further ratified by a recent source in a study from JP Morgan. So again, a number of ways in which you can see that putting sustainability at the core of a business makes it a long-term, strong, robust business, not only in the short term, but for all investors for the long term. Now, this helps us understand why companies, participating organizations say that they are learning from the Global Compact, that that the Global Compact tools and resources help them advance their sustainability in their own company, guide their reporting, drive implementation of policies and practices, and even can shape the company's vision. We also have found that in measures of high ESG companies, it's the UN Global Compact companies are outperforming. Arabesque have a high ESG index, and then they also have a UN Global Compact company index. So they can split out how companies are rated within each of those subsectors. And what they have found is that Global Compact companies are 31% higher on corporate governance ratings, 29% higher on emissions management ratings, and 22% higher on human and labor rights ratings. So then those organizations really are being seen by the investment community as performing better within environmental, social, and governance issues. EcoVadis, the company, the organization that measures supply chain sustainability, has done a similar study. They analyzed 30,000 companies and operations, and within those worked out, was there a difference on the performance of companies aligned to the UN Global Compact 10 principles. And what EcoVadis does is give companies a score out of 100, and what you find is on CSR management systems, there are 12 percentage points higher from a Global Compact company, and on supply chain sustainability overall, 30% more. EcoVadis points higher, 13. So we know that the tools and the support is actually helping. So I hope that really gives you a picture of why it's important that we make these changes in the world, how we can help you make these changes in the business so that we can work together to make these changes, how we can communicate that and inspire many, many other organizations to join the movement and to take these actions, how high these goals need to be, and what it's going to take to make them happen. So if that's of interest and you understand that that's the way forward, there's a little bit of background here about how we might join. There are a couple of ways to join the Global Compact. There's at the signatory tier or the participant tier. The main way to join the Compact is at the participant level. These are organizations who are global, have a global supply chain, have global partners, and want to join us at the global level. That's a participant level. Other organizations who really want to operate just at the local level and have impact in their nation join as a signatory and engage at that level. There is this third tier called LEAD. That is not a tier that you can choose to join. It is earned over time through engagement, through taking leadership action with the UN Global Compact. And LEAD companies are recognized every year as the companies that are really leading the agenda on corporate sustainability. I have articulated here the benefits that an organization is able to receive by being a participant or a signatory in the UN Global Compact, and they cover all the three different areas that we talked about. How you build your trust and transparency, how through reporting your communication on your progress, how you can achieve your sustainability objectives by accessing tools, training, academy, etc., and how you can engage in really shaping the corporate sustainability agenda and showing the world what best practice looks like. How to join is very simple. First of all is to understand and review the application guidelines. You have a help desk, as I said, to help you with that. The heart of it is the letter of commitment. from the CEO of the organization to the Secretary General to commit to the 10 principles and to commit to work together to help us to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals. And then it is simply an online application form. There is a relatively small fee, and that is related to the level of engagement, be it participant or signatory, and also the revenue status of an organization. So thank you very much for listening to this and your interest in what we at the UN Global Compact are trying to achieve together with the business community to create the world that we all want. We hope you'll join the movement and really help us make this a reality. Thank you.